Hello and welcome to Holston Valley Unitarian Universalist Virtual Church. My name is Spencer Conco and I serve on the Religious Services Committee. Today will be a special virtual service because the majority of the content will come from the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, or UUSC. The Service Committee is a part of the larger Unitarian Universalist Association. The mission of the UUSC is to advance social justice and human rights around the world, and in the year 2020 are celebrating its 80th year of existence. A reminder that these are pre-recorded, so there's times where news events happen that seem relevant to mention that aren't because it is pre-recorded. As we enter this space together, we'll light the chalice with the words and voice of our own Bryan Kleske.
We light this chalice with compassion for all people of the earth. We light this chalice for equality for all children at their birth. We illuminate to end all hate with peace and freedom for all. All of this plus love and bliss, the greatest joys of all. All of this plus love and bliss, the greatest joys of all.
Welcome all to this service sponsored by the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. We are grateful to be invited into your worshiping community in this way. I'm Reverend Mary Katherine Morn, President and CEO of UUSC. In uncertain times, it helps to look to times past when we have risen to challenges and tested the strength of our Unitarian Universalist values. We hope the UUSC Sunday service we are offering will provide both consolation and inspiration to your community as we honor 80 years of our UUSC history and look toward a future shaped by hope and justice. Greetings, friends. We are glad to join your worshiping community today for this UUSC Sunday service. Thank you.
Hello, Justice lovers. It's good to be with you in this virtual way.
Like you, we at UUSC are finding our way in this difficult time. In addition to adapting to social distancing, working from home, homeschooling, caring for loved ones, mourning our losses, and finding new ways to connect, we are also discovering all the ways we are called to pivot in our work for human rights. Over the last weeks, we have reached out to all of our partners around the world. We are hearing from them and learning about the ways the pandemic is posing new threats to communities already facing so many long-standing threats. Together with our partners, we are striving to be nimble and creative in responding to needs that are emerging. We feel grateful for our history of deeply rooted partnerships, which makes it possible for us to move quickly to respond. For all of us committed to being a part of creating a world transformed by justice, we know that these commitments are more important now than ever, that it is in times of crisis that human rights for all are most at risk. We are grateful for this opportunity to share how UUSC works for a world transformed by justice, to share what has always guided our work and what guides us still. When we think of social justice and human rights, we often think of words like resistance, fortitude, resilience, and courage, perhaps especially courage. And sometimes this stops us. We know courage. We've seen courage. But we often think of courage as something other people have. So today we want to start with imagination and move to hope. Because the courage to imagine and hope for a new world, a world reflective of the values we cherish, is exactly the courage we need. Imagination and hopes are acts of courage because a vision of what more is possible demands that we move away from the sidelines. Imagination invites us to see beyond the current systems and norms, and hope points us toward new regenerative systems and norms reflecting the values we share.
80 years ago, in the face of rising Nazi repression, Unitarians imagined a different world, a different response from the US isolationism. They knew there was a beloved community that cared about human rights across the country and around the world. And then they asked themselves what they needed to do to get closer to that different world. They asked themselves who else shared their vision for that beloved community. And they asked themselves what they were willing to risk to live their values in the world. They chose to form and support the Unitarian Service Committee. Now, I realize I keep saying they, but in reality, we chose to form and support the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. You choose to form and support the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. Those people 80 years ago were not separate or different from us, from you. They were regular people living average lives, worried about their jobs and children and bills, just like us, just like you. They were overwhelmed by the state of the world in a time of fear and pandemic, fascism and war, anti-Semitism and racism. Just like us, just like you. When the opportunity arose for them to make a difference and affirm the inherent worth and dignity of all people across the world, they took action with their time, with their money, with their influence, just like us. Just like you do every time you write a letter to a politician, go to a protest, volunteer your time, or give your money to UUSC and our partners.
For 80 years, our Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, your Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, has been working in partnership with those most directly impacted by injustice to create a different world, a beloved community where every person's rights are honored and protected. We joined with migrant workers in Texas in the 1940s as they fought against exploitation. We launched desegregation projects in Georgia and Florida in 1960. In 1978, UUSC sponsored the first congressional fact-finding mission to El Salvador as violence there escalated. In the 1980s, we sent emergency funds to ease the Ethiopian famine long before the story reached mainstream US news. We sent emergency medical equipment to Rwanda in the 1990s and then launched the Drumbeat for Darfur campaign in the 2000s to help end the genocide in Sudan. In 2010, we went to Haiti to assist with immediate relief after the earthquake and remained to partner in long-term recovery. Today, UUSC works with organizations in Central America, Mexico, and the United States on the forefront of migrant justice as we seek security for people who wish to remain in their home countries, safety for those traveling along the migrant trail, and justice once people reach the United States. We partner with First and Indigenous communities in the South Pacific, Louisiana, and Alaska, who are on the front lines of the climate change crisis as their homes and way of life are threatened by rising sea levels and rising temperatures. We are working with Rohingya leaders as they seek justice and healing for their communities following genocide and forced displacement from their homeland by the Burmese government and military. And we are joining with the minority Haitian community in the Bahamas after the devastation of Hurricane Dorian as they seek to rebuild their lives with no access to government assistance. I know sometimes, maybe a lot of the time, things can feel hopeless, like the world is moving farther and farther away from our values, from all the progress we have tried to make.
At the time of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee's founding, when it was officially known as the Unitarian Service Committee, the world gave few signs of moving in a better direction. The work of UUSC began in 1939, when Hitler's Germany was dragging all of Europe into war and laying the groundwork for the Holocaust. Thousands of refugees were already displaced from their homes and forced to flee religious and political persecution as the Nazis took power. When Martha and Waitstill Sharp opened the first office of the USC in Prague, they met an embattled Unitarian community at the Unitaria Church that had to preach their opposition to the Nazis in double meanings. During the German occupation of the city, the Nazi secret police began monitoring every sermon given at the Unitarian congregation, listening for subtle messages of dissent. A few years later, they found what they were looking for. In 1941, the minister of the Unitaria congregation, Norbert Čepek, was arrested and deported to the concentration camp at Dachau, where he was killed with poison gas the following fall. Čepek had been personally named by Hitler on a list of 10,000 politically suspect persons slated for murder. Čepek wasn't the only figure associated with the founding of UUSC to make the ultimate sacrifice for human rights. UUSC's early work in Prague involved helping refugees apply for visas and process other paperwork they would need to seek safety abroad. Similar to UUSC's current model of partnering with directly impacted communities, the Service Committee's first employees were Jewish refugees working to protect the rights of their own community. At the time, Jewish people in Prague were already facing persecution under Nazi occupation, and all the warning signs of the coming genocide were in place. They therefore knew the risks they took by staying in the city to help others. Nevertheless, historian Elizabeth Subeck writes, they delayed their own immigration efforts to help other refugees. Ultimately, none were able to emigrate or avoid deportation to the concentration camps. In the face of genocide, religious persecution, political assassination, and all the worst atrocities the human imagination has ever devised, it was an indescribable act of courage for these women and men to hope for a different world.
As it always is. In the face of genocide, religious persecution, political assassination, and all the worst atrocities the human imagination has ever devised, men and women fighting for liberation display indescribable courage. I am in awe of the courage I have seen and learned about through our partnerships at UUSC. And I have also come to understand that the first and most important thing required for courage is imagination. In the reading, activist and author Rebecca Solnit thanks the youth leaders for being unreasonable. She might have also said, thank you for imagining there is another way. Your being unreasonable is what we often hear when structures of power are challenged, when youth challenge their elders, when Indigenous leaders challenge colonizers and industry and demand protection of community sources of water, when congregations, perhaps like yours, challenge authorities and regulations by welcoming a person into sanctuary. Vision and imagination about how things might be different are often discouraged and dismissed by the status quo. And when we allow ourselves to be discouraged, when we resign ourselves to our illusion of powerlessness, when we're cynical, when we don't believe there's another way, we are playing right into the hands of those in power. Our lack of imagination is a tool of empires and tyrants. It's how power gets away with conceding nothing. It's the courage we need right now. The courage to imagine. And the courage to imagine is so important now because it is through courageous imagination that we find the seeds of hope, radical hope, nourishing hope.
It's a hope born of courage that can best be described in the often quoted phrase by the Reverend Jeremiah Wright, the audacity of hope. These words we are so familiar with today originally appeared in a 1995 sermon in which Wright was reflecting on the ravages of racism and apartheid in South Africa. Wright took as the text of his sermon a painting by the Victorian artist George Frederick Waltz, whose depiction of hope shows a blindfolded woman playing a harp. Wright analyzed the message of the painting in these words. The harpist is sitting there in rags. Her clothes are tattered as though she herself had been a victim of Hiroshima or Sharpeville. Yet the artist dared to entitle this painting Hope. See, in spite of being in a world torn by war, in spite of being in a world destroyed by hate, in spite of being in a world devastated by distrust and decimated by disease, in spite of being in a world where apartheid and apathy fed the fires of racism, in spite of all of these things, the woman had the audacity to hope. She had the audacity to hope and to make music and to praise God on the one string she had left. Friends, we have come as far as we have because justice seekers throughout time have continued to have the audacity to keep reaching towards another imagined possibility.
At UUSC, we have joined with audacious, imaginative, hope-filled people for the last 80 years. And with your help, we will continue this vital work for the next 80 years.
And the 80 years after that.
We will continue to go where justice calls, partnering with those most affected by disasters and human rights abuses.
So long as Unitarian Universalists, people of conscience and moral imagination, continue to join with us, we will be here to join in the struggle, to lend our weight to bend the arc of the universe towards justice, to keep turning courageous hope into action.
Thank you, my friends. Be well. Take good care of each other and keep the flame of justice kindled wherever you are today. Blessed be and amen.
Let me close this service now. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and share with all the world.
Hello, I am so happy that we could be together today. Thanks for joining us, and please come back whenever you like. My name is Brittany Butler, and I serve this church on the Ministerial Search Committee. Despite these challenging times, the search committee continues the work to have a new minister in place by August 2021, upon Reverend Jeff Breer's retirement. We will post another pre-recorded virtual church service next Sunday. Please remember that our services are recorded in advance, so sometimes events move forward without us. However, you can find up-to-date information on local events, social justice issues, inspiration, and content for all ages on our Facebook page. Staying connected is so important, so please consider joining the link for virtual coffee hour immediately following this service. A special thanks to the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee for today's service. If you're interested in more information, please visit UUSC.org. As you make your way through the week, remember these words: you are good, you are loved, we all need a little work, and we're all in this together. There's nothing left to say but yay, church!